Marcus Hayes had learned to measure his days in minutes. 5 minutes to pack Sophia's lunch. 7 to braid her hair into the neat rows her teacher preferred. 12 to walk her to the school bus stop on Pike Street, where the Seattle drizzle always seemed to find the gap between her hood and collar. Then 45 back to his apartment, shower, dress, and arrive at TechCorp's glass tower by 7:45, 15 minutes before anyone else. This particular Wednesday morning stretched those minutes thinner. Sophia's uniform skirt needed pressing. The toaster had burned her waffle. She'd asked why Daddy never smiled anymore, and Marcus had no answer that wouldn't crack something inside him he couldn't afford to break. The office on the 3rd floor smelled like burnt coffee and ambition. Marcus set his bag beside his desk, the one near the window that overlooked the Puget Sound when the fog lifted. His workspace held 3 things: a laptop, a photo of Sophia holding her stuffed rabbit Rosie, and a stack of project files that never seemed to shrink. No personal touches. No evidence of the man who used to believe this building held his future. Jennifer's death had taught him about futures, how they collapsed without warning, how a rainy Tuesday could become the last normal day you'd ever know. 8 years had passed since the state trooper knocked on their apartment door, since Marcus had held a 6-month-old who would never remember her mother's face except through photographs. His screen flickered to life. 47 unread emails. A project timeline already bleeding red 2 weeks before deadline. A message from Rachel Martinez asking if he wanted to grab drinks after work. The same question she asked every week, the same answer he'd give. The keyboard clicked under his fingers as he sorted priorities. Client deliverables first. Budget reconciliation second. Team coordination third. The rhythm was familiar, almost meditative. This was what Marcus understood. Concrete problems with measurable solutions. Not the abstract weight of raising a daughter alone, of being the only black senior project manager in a building full of people who thought diversity meant hiring him and calling it progress. His phone buzzed. Karen, the babysitter. Just a check-in text about Sophia's piano lesson that afternoon. Marcus typed back confirmation, then returned to a spreadsheet that made less sense the longer he stared at it. Victoria Chen had been CEO for 6 months. Marcus knew this because everyone knew this. Her arrival had rippled through TechCorp like a stone through still water. She didn't hide in the executive suite the way her predecessor had. She appeared in hallways, asked questions in meetings, actually read the performance reports instead of delegating them to assistants who delegated them to interns. Her name appeared in Marcus's inbox 3 times a week now. Direct questions about project timelines. Clarification requests on budget proposals. Once, she'd asked why he never attended the quarterly celebration events. Marcus had replied honestly, daycare closed at 6, and Sophia couldn't celebrate his achievements alone. Victoria had responded within 5 minutes. Understood. Let's schedule our next check-in during lunch hours instead. That had been a month ago. Since then, they'd met 4 times in the small conference room on the 3rd floor, the one with the broken blinds that let in too much afternoon sun. They'd discussed project strategies, client retention, resource allocation, professional topics, safe topics. Victoria asked questions that suggested she actually read his reports, that she understood the technical details most executives glossed over. She'd never mentioned the elephant that lived in every interaction between them, the weight of being watched, of performing competence at a level that left no room for human error, of knowing that one mistake from him would be measured differently than the same mistake from someone with Ryan Fletcher's complexion. Marcus closed his eyes, rubbed the bridge of his nose. The migraine building behind his temples had nothing to do with the spreadsheet. A burst of laughter from the break room cut through his concentration. Ryan's voice, loud and confident in the way voices became when they'd never needed to modulate themselves. Marcus didn't need to hear the words to know the shape of the conversation. Sports, weekend plans, the easy camaraderie of men who'd never had to calculate the cost of being visible. His phone buzzed again. This time, Sophia's school. Marcus's pulse spiked before he even read the message. but it was just a reminder about parent-teacher conferences next week. He exhaled, saved his spreadsheet, and forced himself back into the rhythm of work. By 9:30, the third floor had filled with its usual ecosystem of sound. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the printer jamming for the third time this week. Marcus had solved 2 client emergencies and identified a budget discrepancy that would save the company $40,000 if anyone bothered to listen. He was deep in a project timeline when footsteps approached his desk. Not the hurried click of someone passing through. Deliberate. Stopping. Marcus looked up. Victoria Chen stood 3 feet away, holding a small tin container. She wore a navy blazer over a white blouse, her dark hair pulled back in a style that was professional without being severe. Her expression held something Marcus couldn't quite read. Curiosity, maybe. Or calculation. Happy birthday, Marcus. He blinked. Had forgotten, actually. 35 years old as of midnight, and he'd been too busy measuring minutes to notice. Thank you. His voice came out more formal than intended. CEO Chen. Victoria's mouth quirked. Call me Victoria. The tin made a soft sound as she set it on his desk next to Sophia's photo. These are homemade. Chocolate chip. The third floor had gone quiet. Not the dramatic silence of a disrupted pattern, but the subtle shift of attention redirecting. Heads turning. Ears tuning to a frequency they'd been monitoring for months. Ryan Fletcher materialized at the edge of Marcus's peripheral vision, grinning that easy grin that came from never having been told to smile less, to take up less space, to be grateful for the opportunities his existence made possible. Boss, you better be careful. Ryan's voice carried just far enough. Marcus is the perfect husband material. Single dad, stable job, responsible as hell. The laughter started small, a chuckle from Linda in accounting, a snort from Kevin, the project manager who'd once told Marcus he was articulate for someone from his background. It built quickly, feeding on itself, on the absurdity of the CEO standing at a mid-level employee's desk with homemade cookies. Victoria's expression shifted. Something playful entered it, something that didn't quite reach her eyes. She turned toward Marcus, and the moment stretched like taffy, like time itself had decided to pay attention. So, Marcus. Her voice was light. Too light. Will you marry me? The laughter exploded. Someone whistled, someone else clapped. The third floor erupted into the kind of collective mirth that came from witnessing something unexpected and fundamentally unthreatening. A joke. An absurdity. The CEO playing along with her employees' casual banter. Marcus felt the laughter land on his skin like acid rain. He didn't laugh, didn't smile, didn't perform the expected response that would have let everyone return to their keyboards and forget this happened. Instead, he met Victoria's eyes, held them, let 5 seconds pass, then 6, then 7. What if I say yes? His voice was quiet, calm. The kind of calm that came from years of swallowing responses that wanted to be screamed. The kind of calm that was its own kind of violence. The laughter died. It didn't fade or taper. It stopped, cut off like someone had pressed mute on the third floor's soundtrack. Linda's smile froze. Kevin's hand paused halfway to his coffee mug. Ryan's grin faltered, replaced by something that looked almost like concern. Victoria's expression did something complicated. The playfulness drained away. Her lips parted as if to speak, but nothing emerged. She stood there, trapped in a moment she'd created without understanding its architecture. Marcus didn't move, didn't break eye contact. He'd answered her question honestly, and honesty had become a weapon he hadn't meant to draw. Someone coughed, the spell fractured. Noise returned in fragments. A keyboard clicked. A phone buzzed. The printer jammed again, its mechanical protest a welcome distraction. Victoria stepped back, cleared her throat. Enjoy the cookies. Her voice had lost its warmth, replaced by something thinner, more uncertain. She turned to leave, then paused. leaned in just close enough that her next words existed only in the space between them. "I don't make empty jokes. Think about it and give me a real answer someday." Then she was gone, her footsteps retreating toward the elevator, toward the executive floor where the air was cleaner and the mistakes were measured in millions instead of moments. Marcus sat very still. The tin of cookies rested next to Sophia's photo. Through the window, Seattle's skyline was doing its usual trick of pretending the sun might actually break through the clouds. Ryan was the first to speak. His voice had lost its earlier joviality, replaced by something that sounded almost like disappointment. "Dude, you actually thought she was serious?" Marcus didn't respond, didn't turn his head to acknowledge the question. He opened the tin instead. The cookies were still warm. Chocolate chips melted into perfectly golden edges, the kind of effort that took time, that required getting up early, that suggested this hadn't been a spontaneous gesture. Linda from accounting appeared at Ryan's shoulder. Her voice was softer than Ryan's but carried the same undertone. "Some people don't understand workplace boundaries." Kevin walked past Marcus's desk on his way to the break room, didn't look at him directly, but his words floated back like smoke. "Diversity hire really thinks he has a shot with the CEO." The phrase landed exactly where it was meant to. Marcus felt it settle into the familiar groove of every similar comment he'd absorbed over 8 years. Over his entire career, if he was honest. The coded language that was never quite actionable, never quite provable, always just plausible enough to survive HR scrutiny. He ate a cookie. It was excellent. Victoria had used real butter, had probably spent an hour in her kitchen at 6 in the morning, measuring and mixing and trying to do something kind. The irony tasted worse than the chocolate. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of forced productivity. Marcus finished the budget reconciliation, sent 3 emails that needed sending, attended a conference call where he was the only person who'd actually read the briefing materials. The third floor returned to its normal rhythm, but the undercurrent had changed. People looked at him differently now. Or maybe they looked at him the same way they always had, and he'd just finally noticed. At noon, Marcus ate lunch at his desk. A sandwich from home. An apple. A bottle of water. He didn't go to the cafeteria where the easy conversations happened, where alliances were built over discussions of football and mortgage rates and the best places to vacation in Cabo. Rachel stopped by at 1:15. She perched on the edge of his desk, her expression somewhere between concerned and curious. "You okay?" Marcus nodded. He was always okay. Okay was his default state, the setting he returned to no matter what turbulence disrupted the flight path. That was intense this morning. He looked at her. Rachel Martinez had been at Tech Corp for 5 years, 2 years longer than Marcus. She was good at her job, well-liked, and possessed the kind of social intelligence that let her navigate office politics without getting burned. They weren't friends exactly, but they existed in the same ecosystem, recognized each other as fellow survivors. It was a joke. Rachel's expression suggested she wasn't sure which part he meant. The question or the answer? "For what it's worth," she said, "I think Victoria was genuinely trying to be nice. The birthday walk thing is something she started last month, trying to be more connected to employees." Marcus unwrapped his apple, bit into it, let the tartness cut through the residue of the morning's sweetness. "I know." Rachel waited, as if expecting him to elaborate. When he didn't, she stood, smoothed her skirt. "Hey, if you ever want to talk, you know, about stuff." He nodded again. Rachel drifted back to her desk, and Marcus was alone with his apple and his inbox, and the quiet certainty that something had shifted on the third floor, something he couldn't quite name but could feel in the weight of glances that lasted half a second too long. By 3 o'clock, his focus had dissolved completely. The spreadsheet on his screen might as well have been written in ancient Greek. He kept returning to Victoria's words. I don't make empty jokes. Give me a real answer someday. What answer could he give that wouldn't be a landmine? What words existed in the space between professional courtesy and personal truth? He was 35 years old, raising an 8-year-old daughter alone, working 60 hours a week to prove he deserved a position he'd earned 3 years ago. He didn't have time for complications. Didn't have room in his carefully constructed life for variables he couldn't control. And yet, Victoria had looked at him, really looked. Not past him, not through him, but at him. For those 7 seconds when the third floor held its breath, she'd seen something that made her expression change from playful to something else entirely. Marcus closed his laptop, rubbed his face. Outside, the Seattle skyline was doing its impression of a postcard, all glass and water and the promise of a sunset that would probably get swallowed by clouds before it materialized. His phone buzzed. Karen, confirming she'd picked up Sophia from school and was walking her to piano lessons. Marcus typed back confirmation, added a reminder about the recital on Saturday, then stared at the conversation thread until the words lost meaning. At 4:30, he started packing his bag. The third floor had mostly emptied. Ryan was still at his desk, headphones on, probably watching highlights from last night's game. Linda had left an hour ago. Kevin was in a late meeting that would probably run until 6 because Kevin liked being seen as the guy who stayed late. Marcus shouldered his bag and headed for the elevator, pressed the button, waited while the machinery groaned somewhere in the building's mechanical heart. The doors opened. Victoria Chen stood inside, alone, a leather briefcase in one hand and her phone in the other. She looked up, and for half a second Marcus considered taking the stairs. But that would be cowardice. And Marcus had learned long ago that cowardice and survival often wore the same face. He stepped in, pressed the button for the ground floor. The doors closed, sealing them in 12 square feet of brushed steel and tension. Victoria spoke first. Her voice was quiet, almost tentative. I owe you an apology. Marcus kept his eyes on the floor indicator. 23rd floor, 22nd. The elevator moved with excruciating slowness. For what? For putting you in that position this morning. She shifted her briefcase to her other hand. I thought. I don't know what I thought. That it would be funny, maybe. A way to break the ice. 17th floor, 16th. Marcus could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that probably had a French name. It wasn't your fault. Victoria made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sigh. No, it was. I'm the CEO. I should understand power dynamics better than that. 12th floor, 11th. The elevator groaned, and for one irrational moment, Marcus imagined it getting stuck, the two of them trapped until maintenance arrived hours later. You asked me to give you a real answer someday. Victoria went very still. The phone in her hand dimmed, screen going dark. I did. What if the answer is yes? The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened onto the marble lobby with its abstract sculptures and the security desk where Jerome always sat, reading detective novels between checking badges. Victoria didn't move. Neither did Marcus. They stood in the metal box while people flowed past in the lobby, heading home to families and lives that probably made more sense than this moment. Then I'd say, Victoria's voice was barely audible, that we'd need to figure out what that means, because I'm not joking this time either. The doors started to close. Marcus caught them with his hand, held them open. Neither am I. He stepped out into the lobby, didn't look back, walked past Jerome's desk, through the rotating doors, into the Seattle afternoon that was already threatening rain. His heart was doing something complicated in his chest, a rhythm that had nothing to do with the physical exertion of walking. Behind him, the elevator doors closed. Victoria Chen was either ascending back to the executive floor or descending to the parking garage. Marcus didn't wait to find out which. The bus stop on 3rd Avenue smelled like diesel and damp concrete. Marcus stood with his back to the shelter, watching traffic crawl through rush hour. His phone showed 4:47. Sophia's piano lesson ended at 5:15. He'd be home by 5:30 if the bus wasn't late, which meant 20 minutes to help her with homework before he needed to start dinner. The minutes stretched and contracted. This was his life. This careful choreography of responsibility and routine. 8 years of it since the night a state trooper had stood in his doorway with a face that promised nothing good. Jennifer would have known what to do. She'd always been better at reading people, at understanding the unspoken rules that governed interaction. Marcus had been the practical one, the planner, the one who built spreadsheets and 5-year projections. She'd been the one who could walk into a room and make everyone feel seen. He missed her most in moments like this, when the world presented a problem without a spreadsheet solution. The bus arrived 7 minutes late. Marcus found a seat near the back, away from the high school kids comparing phones and the man in the business suit who'd clearly had a worse day than anyone else on Route 49. Through the grimy window, Seattle scrolled past in its usual palette of gray and green. His apartment building on Capitol Hill had been built in the 70s and hadn't been updated since. The lobby smelled like old carpet and someone's attempt to mask it with pine-scented cleaner. Marcus climbed 3 flights because the elevator was broken again, then let himself into 3C. Karen was on the couch with Sophia, helping her with multiplication tables. The babysitter looked up when Marcus entered, her weathered face creasing into a smile. Right on time, as always. She stood, collecting her bag and the book she'd been reading during Sophia's practice time. Sophia did great at piano today. Miss Chen says she's ready for the recital. Marcus felt the name land like a physical thing. Miss Chen. Different Chen. Seattle had probably 10,000 Chens. Still, that's wonderful. He helped Karen with her coat, handed her the day's payment in cash because that was their arrangement. Thank you, Karen. See you tomorrow, Mr. Hayes. Karen paused at the door. You look tired. Don't forget to take care of yourself, too. Then she was gone. And it was just Marcus and Sophia in the small apartment with its mismatched furniture and the water stain on the ceiling that the landlord kept promising to fix. Sophia looked up from her homework. Her hair had come loose from the braids he'd done that morning. 8 years old, and already showing signs of the woman she'd become. Jennifer's eyes. Marcus's determination. A combination that would either save her or break her heart. Daddy, how was your day? Marcus set his bag by the door, hung his jacket on the hook, walked to the couch and sat beside his daughter, this small person who was the only thing in his life that made sense. It was complicated, baby girl. Sophia closed her math book. She had Jennifer's habit of reading faces, of knowing when adults were translating truth into something more palatable. Did something bad happen? No. Marcus pulled her close, and she fit against him the way she always had. The way she'd fit when she was 6 months old and her world had just exploded. Nothing bad, just complicated. Sophia was quiet for a moment. Then, Miss Karen says complicated is just another word for confusing. Marcus laughed. Actually, laughed. The sound surprised him. Miss Karen is very wise. They sat together while the apartment settled into evening. Outside, Seattle was doing its thing. Cars honking. Someone's stereo thumping bass through the walls. The city as soundtrack to a life that kept moving forward because that's what life did, whether you understood the direction or not. Eventually, Sophia wiggled free. I'm hungry. Marcus stood, stretched. His back protested. 35 and already feeling the accumulation of hours hunched over keyboards, of nights spent on second-hand furniture, of years carrying weight that should have been distributed across 2 sets of shoulders. What do you want for dinner? Can we have pancakes for dinner? Sophia grinned, and in that moment, she was purely 8 years old, unburdened by the questions that would come later. Why don't I have a mom? Why do some kids have both parents? Why does Daddy always look so tired? Why not? Her voice was reasonable. They're round. They have protein. That's basically a balanced meal. Marcus headed to the kitchen. You've been talking to Miss Karen too much. He made pancakes. They ate them with too much syrup while Sophia told him about her day, about the boy in her class who'd eaten paste, about the substitute teacher who didn't know how to use the smartboard, about the upcoming science fair and her idea for a project involving plant growth and different types of music. Marcus listened, asked questions, pretended his mind wasn't replaying the moment in the elevator, Victoria's voice saying she wasn't joking either. After dinner, Sophia took her bath. Marcus cleaned the kitchen, which was easier than thinking. Dishes, counters, the stove that had one burner that didn't work quite right. The familiar rhythm of making order from chaos. By 8 o'clock, Sophia was in bed with Rosie tucked under her arm. The stuffed rabbit had been a gift from Jennifer when Sophia was born. It was worn now, one ear hanging by threads, the pink fur faded to something closer to gray. But Sophia wouldn't let him replace it. Rosie was the only physical connection she had to a mother she couldn't remember. Marcus read 3 chapters of the book they were working through, a story about a girl who could talk to animals. Sophia's eyes grew heavy halfway through chapter 2, but she fought sleep the way she always did, afraid of missing something. By 8:30, she'd lost the battle. Marcus kissed her forehead, turned off the light except for the small lamp that kept the shadows at bay, and retreated to the living room. The apartment was quiet in the way only empty spaces could be. Marcus sat on the couch, opened his laptop, and stared at the screen without seeing it. His email showed 3 new messages. One from Rachel, checking if he was okay. One from a client asking about timeline adjustments. One from Victoria Chen. Marcus opened the last one. The message was brief, professional, almost impersonal. Marcus, I want to apologize again for this morning. It was inappropriate, and I should have considered the position it put you in. If you'd prefer to work with a different executive sponsor for your projects, I'll understand and make arrangements. Victoria. He read it 3 times. Each time, the words rearranged themselves into different architectures of meaning. Was this an apology? A dismissal? An opening? A closing? Marcus closed his eyes, thought about Jennifer, about the morning she'd left for work and never came home, about the phone call that had split his life into before and after, about holding Sophia in the hospital, this tiny thing who depended on him completely, while his world dissolved into questions without answers. He'd survived that, built a life from the rubble, created routines that worked, systems that functioned, a framework where Sophia could grow up knowing she was loved, even if she'd never know her mother's embrace. And now Victoria Chen was standing at the edge of that framework, asking questions he didn't know how to answer. Marcus opened a reply window, typed 3 different responses, deleted all of them. Finally, he wrote, "No apology necessary. I don't need a different sponsor. And for the record, I meant what I said." He sent it before he could reconsider, closed his laptop, sat in the quiet apartment while Seattle hummed outside his windows. His phone buzzed, a response already. Marcus opened it with hands that weren't quite steady. Victoria's message was even briefer than her first. "Then we need to talk. Tomorrow. Lunch. I'll bring sandwiches." Marcus set down his phone, looked at Sophia's closed bedroom door, at the apartment that was too small and too expensive and the only stable thing in his daughter's life, at the photo on the wall of him and Jennifer on their wedding day, both of them young and stupid with hope. He typed, "Okay." Sleep didn't come easily. Marcus lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, watching shadows from passing cars paint abstract patterns on the plaster. His mind kept returning to the elevator, to Victoria's expression when he'd stepped out without looking back, to the way her voice had sounded when she said she wasn't joking either. At 2:17, he got up, made tea he wouldn't drink, stood at the kitchen window looking out at the city's insomnia. Seattle never fully slept. There were always lights, always movement, always evidence that other people were awake too, fighting their own battles with darkness and uncertainty. By 3, he was back in bed. By 4, he'd given up on sleep entirely. He rose, showered in the dark so he wouldn't wake Sophia, dressed in clothes he'd set out the night before. At 6, he woke Sophia with the same gentle routine they'd established years ago. Time to get up, baby girl. School day. She emerged from sleep slowly, the way children did, as if consciousness was a negotiation rather than a switch. Marcus braided her hair, packed her lunch, walked her to the bus stop through a morning that threatened rain but hadn't quite decided to commit. At the bus stop, Sophia looked up at him with eyes too perceptive for 8 years old. "Daddy? Are you okay?" Marcus knelt so they were eye level. The question she'd asked yesterday. The question she'd probably keep asking until he figured out how to answer honestly. "I'm figuring some things out, sweetheart, but I'm okay, I promise." Sophia studied his face the way she studied math problems, looking for patterns, for solutions. Then she nodded, kissed his cheek, and boarded the bus with the other children, heading toward futures they couldn't yet imagine. Marcus watched until the bus turned the corner on Pike Street. Then he walked back to his apartment, gathered his things, and headed to TechCorp for a day that would either change everything or prove that some questions weren't meant to be answered. The third floor was quiet when he arrived at 7:45. Marcus made coffee, opened his laptop, stared at emails that seemed less important than they had yesterday. The budget reconciliation he'd been working on felt like ancient history, a problem from someone else's life. At 11:30, his phone buzzed. Conference room C. 30 minutes. Marcus saved his work, closed unnecessary windows, walked to the bathroom and looked at himself in the mirror. Same face he'd worn for 35 years. Same exhaustion around the eyes. Same tension in the jaw that came from years of measuring words before speaking them. He returned to his desk, waited, watched the clock count down minutes that felt both too fast and too slow. At 11:58, he walked to conference room C, the small one with the broken blinds. Victoria was already there, 2 sandwiches on the table, 2 bottles of water, a yellow legal pad with nothing written on it. She looked up when he entered, closed the door. "Thank you for coming." Marcus sat across from her. The table between them felt like both barrier and bridge. Victoria pushed one sandwich toward him. "Turkey and Swiss. I hope that's okay." "It's fine." They sat in silence for a moment. Victoria picked at the edge of her sandwich without eating it. Marcus took a bite of his, more to have something to do than from any actual hunger. "I've been thinking about yesterday." Victoria's voice was careful. "About what you said. About what I said. About the fact that we're having this conversation at all." Marcus waited. He'd learned patience from necessity, from years of being the only black face in rooms where his words were weighed on scales calibrated for disappointment. "I don't know what this is." Victoria gestured between them. "This. But I know it's something. And I know that something is complicated by the fact that I'm your CEO, and you report to me indirectly, and this building is full of people who would love to find reasons to question both our judgments." Marcus set down his sandwich. "All of that is true. But you asked me to give you a real answer. And my real answer is that I don't know what this is either. I just know that when you asked if I'd marry you, even as a joke, something in me wanted to say yes. Not because I'm looking for a wife or because I think you're looking for a husband, but because in that moment, someone actually saw me. Not the project manager, not the single dad who leaves at 5, not the diversity hire. Me." Victoria's hands had gone still. She was looking at him with an intensity that made Marcus want to look away. But he didn't. He held her gaze the way he'd held it in the elevator. "I see you." Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. "I have been seeing you for months. That's the problem. That it's a problem, or that you've been seeing me?" Victoria smiled, and it transformed her face from professional composure to something more human. "Both." Marcus felt something unlock in his chest. some mechanism that had been wound too tight for too long. So what do we do? Victoria picked up the legal pad, drew a line down the center, started making 2 columns. On the left, complications. On the right, possibilities. She wrote quickly, her handwriting precise. Under complications, power dynamics, office politics, my position, your career, gossip, HR policies. Under possibilities, she paused, looked at Marcus. Help me out here. Marcus leaned forward, studied the blank column. Finally, honesty, understanding, someone who sees the whole person. Victoria wrote it down, added, partnership, support, 2 people who know what it means to be alone. They filled the possibilities column slowly. Each entry felt like a small act of courage. When the magazine finished, Victoria set down the pen. The complications outweigh the possibilities. Marcus nodded. They always do. That's not how decisions get made. How do they get made? By figuring out which column you can live with. Victoria tapped the legal pad. I've spent my entire career managing complications, building strategies around obstacles. But I've never been good at the possibilities side, at believing something might work just because it feels right. Marcus thought about Sophia, about the moment he'd first held her, this screaming bundle of need and vulnerability, and known his life would never be simple again. Known also that simple wasn't the point. I have a daughter who asks me every day if I'm okay, and I keep telling her I am. But lately I'm not sure. Not because anything's wrong, but because I'm starting to realize that okay isn't the same as good. What would good look like? Marcus surprised himself by answering honestly. Someone to talk to. About real things. Someone who understands that my life is complicated and doesn't expect it to be simple. Victoria folded the legal pad. Put it aside. I can't promise anything. I can't even promise we should try this. But I can promise I won't make empty jokes again. If we do this, we do it knowing it's real. Marcus stood. So did Victoria. They were standing 3 feet apart, close enough to see the uncertainty in each other's faces, far enough to maintain the pretense of professional distance. One more thing. Marcus kept his voice steady. If we do this, Sophia has to be okay with it. She's 8 years old, but she's the most important person in my life. Nothing happens that might hurt her. Victoria nodded. I understand. That's not a complication. That's a requirement. They stood there for another moment, 2 people who'd somehow stumbled into a conversation that had no map, no precedent, no guide for navigating terrain that combined professional boundaries with personal honesty. Eventually, Victoria checked her watch. I have a meeting at 1. I should get back to work. Neither moved. Then Victoria extended her hand, a formal gesture that felt absurdly appropriate given everything they'd just said. We'll figure this out. Marcus took her hand, shook it, felt the warmth of her palm against his, the firm grip that spoke to confidence and uncertainty in equal measure. We'll try. He left conference room C and returned to the 3rd floor, where the normal sounds of office life continued in their endless loop. Ryan was laughing at something on his computer. Linda was on a phone call about budget reconciliations. The printer was jamming again. Marcus sat at his desk, opened his laptop, stared at the spreadsheet he'd been working on for 2 days. His hands were shaking slightly. Somewhere on the executive floor, Victoria Chen was walking into a meeting that probably mattered to the company's bottom line, making decisions that affected hundreds of employees. Being the person who'd fought her way to a position where her voice carried weight. And she'd taken time to sit in a conference room with broken blinds and figure out if 2 complicated people could find a way to be less alone. Marcus closed the spreadsheet, opened a new document, began writing down everything he needed to think through. The practical questions, the emotional ones, The impossible calculus of whether it was worth risking the stability he'd built for the possibility of something that might not work. He was still writing when his phone buzzed at 4:30. A text from Karen confirming she had Sophia. Another text 10 seconds later, this one from Victoria. "Thank you for lunch, for being honest, for not running." Marcus typed back, "Thank you for seeing me." He packed his bag at 5 o'clock sharp, took the elevator down with 3 other employees who were discussing weekend plans, walked through the lobby where Jerome was reading a different detective novel, caught the bus on 3rd Avenue. The ride home felt different. The same route, same stops, same diesel smell. But Marcus was different. He'd crossed some line he hadn't known existed, stepped into a space where the future wasn't just more of the same careful choreography. Sophia was doing homework when he arrived. Karen had made her a snack. Everything was normal. Everything was routine. Marcus paid Karen, thanked her, closed the door on his small apartment with its water-stained ceiling and its second-hand furniture. "Baby girl, can we talk?" Sophia looked up from her homework. Her expression shifted from casual to concerned in the space of a heartbeat. Marcus sat beside her on the couch, took a breath, tried to figure out how to explain something he barely understood himself. "You know how sometimes grown-ups have friends?" Sophia nodded, wary. "Well, Daddy might have a new friend, someone from work, and I wanted to make sure you'd be okay with that." Sophia's eyes were Jennifer's eyes, dark and perceptive. "Is it Miss Victoria?" Marcus blinked. "How did you know?" Sophia shrugged, 8 years old and already possessing wisdom that shouldn't fit in such a small body. "You've been different since your birthday, and you said her name funny when Miss Karen mentioned Miss Chen at piano." Marcus felt his heart do something complicated. "You're too smart for your own good." Sophia leaned against him. "Is Miss Victoria nice?" "I think so." "Yes. Does she make you happy?" Marcus considered the question. "I don't know yet, but she makes me feel like maybe I could be. Someday." Sophia was quiet. Marcus waited, giving her space to process, to ask questions, to object if she needed to. Finally, Sophia spoke. Her voice was small but clear. "I think Mommy would want you to be happy." Marcus pulled his daughter close, felt tears he wouldn't let fall, breathed in the scent of her shampoo and the lingering sweetness of Karen's afternoon snack. "Thank you, baby girl." They sat together while the apartment darkened and Seattle moved through its evening routines. 2 people in a small space, figuring out how to make room for possibility without abandoning the careful structures that kept them safe. Later, after dinner and homework and the bedtime story that Sophia insisted on, even though she was getting too old for them, Marcus sat alone in the living room with his laptop. He opened his email, found Victoria's last message, hit reply, started typing, deleted it, started again. Finally, he wrote, "Sophia knows. She says it's okay. I think that means we're doing this." He sent it, closed his laptop, sat in the dark apartment listening to the city breathe. His phone buzzed 5 minutes later. Victoria's response was simple. "Tomorrow, we start figuring out what this means. Thank you for trusting me with something so important." Marcus set down his phone, looked at the photo of Jennifer on the wall. She was smiling in that picture, wind catching her hair, eyes bright with the future they'd been planning. "I hope this is okay." He spoke to the photo, to the memory, to the ghost of a life that had ended too soon. "I hope you'd understand." The apartment didn't answer, but Marcus felt something shift anyway. Some permission granted, or maybe just acknowledged, that moving forward wasn't betrayal, that Sophia deserved a father who could be more than just okay. He went to bed that night and slept better than he had in months. Monday morning brought rain. Derek Porter had been at TechCorp for 12 years, long enough to watch 3 CEOs come and go, long enough to know which bathrooms the executives never used, which conference rooms had the best acoustics for eavesdropping, which administrative assistants knew everything worth knowing. long enough to have been passed over for promotion twice, each rejection delivered with the same corporate language about leadership qualities and cultural fit. He'd watched Marcus Hayes arrive 6 years ago, watched him navigate the third floor with that quiet competence that made other people look inefficient by comparison, watched him collect accolades and project wins while Derek's own achievements got buried in quarterly reports nobody read. Now he sat in his office on the fourth floor, door closed, scrolling through his phone. The video had been posted to an internal Slack channel 3 hours ago. Someone had filmed Victoria's birthday walk yesterday. The whole thing, the cookies, the joke, Marcus's response, the silence that followed. Derek played it 6 times. Each viewing revealed new details. The way Victoria's expression changed, the coded comments from Ryan and Linda afterward, the moment when everything shifted from humor to something else entirely. His phone buzzed. Thomas Crawford, the HR director. "We need to talk. My office. 10 minutes. Derek pocketed his phone, straightened his tie, walked down the corridor where portraits of TechCorp's founders hung like judgments on the wall. Thomas's office smelled like leather and old coffee. The HR director sat behind a desk that was too large for the space, making the whole room feel compressed. He gestured to a chair without preamble. "Close the door." Derek complied, sat, waited while Thomas pulled up something on his computer screen, then rotated the monitor so they could both see. The video. Again. Thomas tapped the screen. "This is a problem." Derek kept his expression neutral. "How so?" Thomas leaned back. His chair squeaked. "We have an optics issue." The CEO making what could be construed as a romantic advance toward a subordinate. In front of witnesses. On camera. It was clearly a joke. Thomas's expression suggested he'd heard better lies. Was it? Because Marcus Hayes's response didn't sound like he took it as a joke. And Victoria's follow-up comment, the one that wasn't captured on video but 3 people have confirmed, suggests she wasn't entirely joking either. Derek felt something shift in the room's atmosphere. This wasn't a warning. This was an opportunity being gift-wrapped and handed to him. "What do you want me to do?" Thomas closed the video, folded his hands on the desk. "I want you to be aware that we're monitoring the situation. Victoria is new to the CEO role. She's made some unconventional choices. The board is watching closely. If there are any indications of favoritism, inappropriate relationships, or compromised judgment, we need documentation." Derek nodded slowly. "You want me to watch Marcus Hayes. I want you to pay attention. You work on the same projects. You see the same reports. If there are any irregularities, any signs that personal feelings are affecting professional decisions, the company needs to know. What kind of irregularities?" Thomas picked up a pen, rolled it between his fingers. "Budget approvals that don't make sense. Project assignments that seem preferential. Meetings that happen behind closed doors without clear business justification. Anything that suggests Victoria is giving Marcus special treatment." Derek stood. "I understand." Thomas set down the pen. "This is about protecting the company, Derek, not about personal grievances." "Of course." Derek left the office, walked back to the 4th floor, sat at his desk and opened a new spreadsheet, started tracking every interaction between Victoria Chen and Marcus Hayes that he could verify or observe. Meeting times, email timestamps, project assignments. By noon, he had 17 data points. By 3:34. The pattern was there if you looked for it. Victoria checked in with Marcus more than any other project manager, scheduled lunch meetings, responded to his emails within minutes, while other requests languished for hours. Derek's phone rang. Rachel Martinez from the 3rd floor. "Hey, Derek, quick question about the Jensen project budget." He answered her questions, kept his voice friendly, professional. At the end of the call, he asked casually, "How's Marcus doing? I heard yesterday was interesting." Rachel's laugh sounded forced. "Yeah, that was awkward, but you know Marcus, he's handling it fine. Has Victoria said anything? Not to me, but they had lunch today. Conference room C." Derek made a note. Conference room C, 11:30 to 1 o'clock. Blinds closed. After Rachel hung up, he sat staring at his spreadsheet. Two people having lunch wasn't evidence of anything, except when combined with everything else. The birthday cookies. The elevator conversation Linda had mentioned. The way Victoria's entire management style seemed calibrated around Marcus Hayes's schedule and preferences. Derek opened his desk drawer, retrieved a business card he'd been saving for 6 months. A private investigator named Mitchell Crane, who specialized in corporate background checks. He'd used Crane once before, unofficially, when a competitor had tried to poach one of TechCorp's clients. The results had been thorough, discreet, useful. He dialed the number. Crane answered on the third ring. His voice was gravel and cigarettes. "This is Crane." Derek identified himself, explained he needed background information on an employee. Nothing illegal, just a comprehensive review, financial history, criminal records, civil litigation, social media presence, past employment, references, the works. Name? Marcus Hayes. Derek spelled it. 35 years old. Seattle resident. Works as a senior project manager. Crane's keyboard clicked. "When do you need this?" 2 weeks. It'll cost you $3,000. Derek didn't hesitate. "Fine, send me the contract." He hung up, returned to his spreadsheet. $3,000 was nothing compared to what a VP position would mean to his career, his retirement, his ability to stop watching other people get the recognition he'd earned through years of competent, reliable, thankless work. His phone buzzed again. Text from Kevin Murphy, another project manager, grabbing drinks after work. "You in?" Derek replied, "Can't tonight, working late on something." Which was true. He had work to do. Real work that had nothing to do with budget projections or client deliverables. The kind of work that required patience and careful documentation and the ability to recognize when the universe was handing you exactly what you needed. The rest of the week passed in careful observation. Derek attended meetings where Victoria spoke, watched how her attention shifted when Marcus entered a room, noted the micro-expressions that suggested their lunch conversation had been the beginning of something, not the end. On Friday, Derek ate lunch at his desk while monitoring the third floor through strategic visits to the bathroom and break room. Marcus left at 5 sharp, like always. Victoria stayed until 7, like always. But before Marcus left, they'd stood by his desk for 90 seconds, speaking in voices too low for anyone else to hear. Derek's phone showed the timestamp, documented it in his spreadsheet. 90 seconds of conversation between a CEO and a project manager who'd just publicly discussed marriage, even as a joke, even with qualifications. By Friday evening, Derek had compiled 47 separate interactions worth noting. Individually, they meant nothing. Collectively, they painted a picture of two people navigating something that had no business existing in a corporate environment. Monday brought Rain and Sophia Hayes. Derek was in the break room getting coffee when he heard the commotion. A child's voice, bright and clear, echoing down the third-floor corridor. He stepped into the hallway with his mug, curious. Marcus was leading an 8-year-old girl toward conference room C. The girl clutched a stuffed rabbit and a backpack covered in cartoon stars. Marcus was speaking quietly, his voice carrying the kind of gentle authority that came from years of single parenthood. "Sophia, you need to stay in this room. Color, read, watch videos, but don't leave unless it's an emergency, okay?" The girl nodded solemnly. "I'll be good, Daddy," like a mouse. Derek filed the image away, returned to his office, checked Sophia's name against school records he'd pulled from Marcus's HR file. Sophia Hayes, 8 years old, mother deceased, no other guardians listed. Emergency contact, Karen Foster, babysitter. At 11:15, Derek walked past conference room C. The door was open 3 inches. Sophia sat at the table with coloring books spread around her. The stuffed rabbit watched from a chair. At 11:45, Derek watched Victoria Chen descend from the executive floor. She walked directly to conference room C, knocked softly, entered. Derek positioned himself near the water fountain. From there, he could see through the conference room's glass wall without being obvious. Victoria had knelt beside Sophia, was speaking to her, smiling. The girl responded shyly, then with growing confidence. Derek watched Victoria pull something from her blazer pocket. Candy, probably. The girl accepted it carefully, looking to the corner where Marcus must have been standing, just out of Derek's sight line. The interaction lasted 3 minutes. When Victoria emerged, her expression held something Derek had never seen before. Softness, genuine warmth. The kind of unguarded emotion that had no place in a CEO's professional arsenal. He returned to his office, updated his spreadsheet. Victoria Chen visits Marcus's daughter during work hours. Conference room C, 11:45 to 11:48. No business justification. By lunch, the third floor was buzzing. Linda from accounting stopped by Derek's office around 1:30. "Did you see Victoria with Marcus's kid this morning?" Derek kept his expression mildly interested. "I heard something about it." Linda lowered her voice. "She was in there for like 5 minutes, talking to the girl, being all motherly. It's sweet, but also..." "Also what?" Linda glanced toward the corridor. "Also kind of weird, right? The CEO doesn't usually interact with employees' kids, especially not during work hours when there are actual business matters to attend to. Maybe she was just being nice." Linda's expression said she knew better, or maybe she's being something else. "You've seen how she looks at him." Derek made a sympathetic sound. Let Linda feel like she was confiding in an ally. After she left, he opened a new document. Started drafting something that looked like a memo but wasn't quite. Just observations. Patterns. Questions that any responsible employee might raise about potential conflicts of interest. He saved it. Didn't send it anywhere yet. Timing mattered with these things. Tuesday brought the first signs that others were noticing the same patterns Derek had documented. Ryan Fletcher cornered Derek in the parking garage after work. Derek was unlocking his car when Ryan appeared, hands shoved in his pockets against the Seattle damp. "Can I ask you something?" "Off the record?" Derek hit the unlock button. "Sure." Ryan glanced around like corporate espionage might be happening between the Subarus and Priuses. "You've been here longer than most of us. Have you ever seen a CEO get this involved with a mid-level employee?" "Depends what you mean by involved." Ryan's frustration was obvious. "Come on, Marcus. Victoria, the birthday thing, the lunch meetings. Now she's playing grandmother to his kid during work hours." Derek chose his words carefully. "I think Victoria is trying to be approachable, accessible. Maybe she's overcorrecting from the last CEO." Ryan shook his head. "This isn't about being accessible. This is about whatever's happening between them. And don't tell me nothing's happening. I saw them by his desk Friday. The way they were looking at each other." "What do you want me to say, Ryan?" "I want you to tell me I'm not crazy. That other people see this too." Derek opened his car door. Other people see it. Whether it means anything is another question. He drove home to his apartment in Ballard. 3,800 square feet that felt emptier every year. Heated himself leftovers from the Thai place on Market Street. Sat at his kitchen table with his laptop open to the spreadsheet that was becoming an obsession. 63 documented interactions now. Meetings, emails, the birthday incident, the elevator conversation Linda had described, Sophia's office visit, Victoria's response. Each entry was factual, time-stamped, verifiable. Together they told a story about two people who'd crossed or were crossing a line that shouldn't exist between executives and subordinates. Derek closed the spreadsheet, opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving, poured a glass and stood at his window overlooking the street where rain fell in sheets. He thought about the VP position he'd been denied. The first time they'd said he needed more leadership experience. The second time, more cross-functional collaboration. Both times, the real message had been clear: you're competent, but not exceptional. Valuable, but not indispensable. Marcus Hayes was exceptional. Everyone agreed, client after client praised his work. Projects under his management came in on time and under budget. He handled crises with a calm that made other people look panicked by comparison. But being exceptional didn't mean being untouchable. Derek finished his wine, returned to his laptop, opened the private investigator's preliminary report that had arrived that afternoon. Mitchell Crane's work was thorough. Financial records showing Marcus lived paycheck to paycheck, a small savings account, no investments, rent paid on time but barely, credit score decent but strained, no criminal record, no lawsuits, no scandals. But the report included something Derek hadn't expected: a note about Marcus's employment gap 8 years ago, 3 months where he'd disappeared from the workforce entirely. The timing coincided with his wife's death, but that gap had never been properly documented in his employment records. Just a blank space where explanations should have been. Derek made a note to follow up on that, not because it meant anything directly, but because gaps were leverage. Questions that couldn't be easily answered had power. His phone buzzed. Email from Thomas Crawford, subject line, follow-up needed. Derek opened it. Thomas wanted documentation of anything unusual in project assignments or budget approvals over the past 6 months. Specific focus on projects managed by Marcus Hayes. Turnaround in 72 hours. Derek smiled, poured himself another glass of wine, sat down to compile exactly what Thomas had requested. Wednesday afternoon, Derek attended a budget review meeting. Victoria was there. So was Marcus, presenting projections for the Jensen account. Derek watched them work in tandem, Victoria asking clarifying questions, Marcus providing context. Their rhythm was seamless, almost choreographed. Afterward, Derek lingered in the corridor, watched Victoria and Marcus walk together toward the elevator. They weren't touching, weren't even standing particularly close, but something in their body language screamed intimacy, the way Marcus angled toward her, how Victoria's attention never wandered even when other people passed. Derek pulled out his phone, pretended to check messages while actually timing how long they stood together. 4 minutes. 5. 6. Finally, Victoria headed toward the executive floor. Marcus returned to the 3rd floor. Derek followed Marcus at a distance, watched him sit at his desk, saw the small smile that crossed his face before he opened his laptop and returned to work. That evening, Derek sent Thomas Crawford a 20-page report. Budget allocations showed no irregularities. Project assignments were based on merit and availability. Everything was clean, professional, appropriate. But Derek included an addendum, a list of subjective observations, meeting frequencies that seemed excessive, response times that suggested priority treatment. The birthday incident, Sophia's office visit, the coded language other employees were using to describe what they'd noticed. Nothing actionable, but everything suggestive. Seeds planted in fertile soil. Thursday brought the opportunity Derek had been waiting for. He was reviewing quarterly financials when he noticed something in the vendor payment logs. A consulting firm called Meridian Solutions had been paid $47,000 over 3 months. The invoices were vague. Advisory services, strategic consultation, implementation support. Derek dug deeper. Meridian Solutions had no website, no LinkedIn presence. The business address was a UPS store in Spokane. The contact number went to voicemail that never got returned. He cross-referenced the approval signatures. All the invoices had been authorized by Victoria Chen. Derek's pulse quickened. This might be nothing. A legitimate vendor with a low profile. Or it might be something. A shell company. A kickback scheme. Something worse. He pulled up TechCorp's confidential merger file. the one only 7 people had access to. As a senior finance director, Derek was authorized. The file was necessary for budget modeling related to the acquisition. The file detailed plans to acquire a competitor called Tech Venture Systems for $45 million. Highly sensitive, market-moving if leaked early. Derek stared at the file, at the list of authorized personnel, then at his calendar where he'd documented every interaction between Victoria and Marcus. An idea crystallized. Elegant. Simple. Devastating if executed correctly. He spent Friday preparing. Renamed the merger file to something innocuous. Q2's Project Budget Review, XLSX. Drafted an email to Marcus that would look professional. Routine. The kind of request that happened 100 times a week across TechCorp's network. Marcus, need your input on Q2 budget projections before board presentation. File attached. Let me know if you see any issues with the timeline. Thanks, Derek. He saved the draft, didn't send it yet. Timing mattered. He needed Marcus to open the file when it would be noticed, when the access logs would create maximum damage. That afternoon, Derek walked past Conference Room C. Marcus was inside with Sophia, helping her with homework. The girl's concentration was fierce, pencil gripped tight, tongue poking out slightly as she worked through a math problem. Derek felt nothing watching them. No guilt, no hesitation. This was business, survival, the same ruthless calculus that had governed every promotion, every advancement, every success in his 12-year career. Marcus Hayes had a daughter who depended on him. That was unfortunate, but Derek had a future that had been repeatedly denied. And in the algebra of corporate politics, self-preservation always won. Friday evening, Derek stayed late. Waited until most of the building had cleared. At 4:28, he scheduled the email to Marcus for delivery at 4:30, timed exactly when Marcus would be gathering his things to leave. The kind of timing that invited a quick glance before heading out. Just long enough to open the file. Not long enough to realize what it actually was. Derek watched his inbox, waited for the automatic read receipt. It came at 4:32. Marcus Hayes had opened the email. Derek pulled up the network access logs. Waited. Watched the timestamps roll by. 4:33. File opened from Marcus's IP address. 4:34. File closed. 60 seconds. That was all it took. Marcus had seen the first page, realized it was wrong, closed it immediately, probably deleted the email, but he'd opened it. The logs would show that, and Derek had already prepared the next phase. He forwarded the merger file to an anonymous email address he'd created using a coffee shop's Wi-Fi. Made it look like the file had been sent externally at 11:15 that evening. Used IP masking software he'd purchased specifically for this purpose. Made sure the digital fingerprints pointed in enough directions to create confusion, but could ultimately be traced back to activity on the TechCorp network. By midnight, the trap was set. A confidential file accessed by Marcus Hayes. The same file leaked externally hours later. Circumstantial, but damning. The kind of evidence that would trigger an immediate investigation. Derek cleared his browser history, shut down his computer using protocols that would erase temporary files, drove home through empty Seattle streets, slept better than he had in months. Monday morning, Derek was at his desk by 7, spent the first hour refreshing his email, waiting. At 8:47, his phone rang. Thomas Crawford, my office, now. Bring any documentation you have on the Jensen Project financials. Derek grabbed his laptop, walked to Thomas's office with the measured pace of someone who had nothing to hide. Thomas sat behind his desk with Victoria Chen and Sarah Kim, TechCorp's legal counsel. Both women wore expressions that suggested this wasn't a social call. Close the door. Sit down. Derek complied, set his laptop on his knees, waited while Thomas opened a folder on his desk. We have a situation. Victoria's voice was tight. A confidential merger file was leaked over the weekend. The file was accessed by Marcus Hayes Friday afternoon. It was sent to an external email address that evening. Derek let appropriate surprise cross his face. Marcus? That doesn't make sense. Sarah Kim leaned forward. We're conducting a full investigation, but the access logs are clear. Marcus opened the file at 4:33 p.m. It was forwarded externally at 11:15 p.m. the same day. From his account? Sarah shook her head. From an anonymous account, but the network activity traces back to a TechCorp IP block, and Marcus was the last authorized user to access the file before it was leaked. Derek absorbed this, kept his expression professionally concerned. Have you talked to Marcus? Not yet. Thomas tapped the folder. We need to document everything before we make any moves. That's why you're here. I need you to review every file Marcus has accessed in the past 3 months. Every email, every project document. Look for patterns. Look for anything that might explain why he'd leak confidential information. Derek nodded, opened his laptop. I'll start immediately, but for what it's worth, this seems out of character. Marcus has always been solid. Victoria's expression flickered. Her voice was measured. I agree, which is why we need a thorough investigation before drawing conclusions. Derek spent the next 8 hours performing the analysis Thomas had requested. Reviewed access logs, email metadata, document timestamps. Built a timeline that showed Marcus's network activity in forensic detail. He found nothing irregular, because Marcus hadn't done anything wrong. But Derek included his observations anyway. Soft language that suggested possibility without making direct accusations. The increased interaction between Victoria and Marcus. The potential for compromised judgment. The birthday incident as possible evidence of inappropriate boundaries. By 5 p.m., he'd compiled a 40-page report, sent it to Thomas, Victoria, and Sarah Kim, then sat back and waited for the machinery of corporate investigation to grind forward. Tuesday morning brought the emergency all-hands meeting. Derek arrived at conference room A 10 minutes early, watched employees file in with expressions ranging from curious to concerned. The room filled quickly, 200 people crammed into a space designed for 150. Marcus arrived at 8:57, sat in the middle section. His face was carefully neutral, but Derek could see the tension in his shoulders, could read the preparation in how he held himself. Marcus knew something was coming. At 9 sharp, Thomas Crawford stood at the front of the room with Sarah Kim. Victoria sat in the back, arms crossed, watching. Thomas didn't waste time. We've discovered a serious security breach. A confidential merger file was accessed without proper authorization and subsequently leaked externally. Whispers erupted. Derek watched faces around the room. Shock. Concern. The usual responses to hearing that someone had broken the cardinal rule of corporate security. Thomas held up a hand. We've traced the access logs. The file was sent to and opened by Marcus Hayes last Friday afternoon. Every head turned. Marcus sat perfectly still as 200 pairs of eyes found him. His expression didn't change, didn't show panic or confusion, just a careful blankness that suggested he'd been expecting this. I didn't leak anything. Marcus's voice carried across the room. Calm. Clear. The same tone he probably used with Sophia when she needed reassurance. Thomas pulled up a printed email on the projector. This shows the file was sent to you at 4:30 p.m. These are the access logs showing you opened it at 4:33. Marcus nodded. I opened a file I thought was a budget review. When I realized it was marked confidential, I closed it immediately. I didn't download it, didn't forward it, didn't share it with anyone, but you still accessed restricted information. Derek watched Thomas deliver the line with appropriate gravity. Information you weren't authorized to see, because it was mislabeled. Marcus's frustration was starting to show. The file name said Budget Review. I thought I was opening a project file. Sarah Kim stepped forward. According to company policy, unauthorized access to confidential files is grounds for immediate suspension pending investigation. Thomas looked toward Victoria. The room waited. Derek felt his pulse quicken. This was the moment. The point where Victoria would either protect Marcus and confirm everyone's suspicions about their relationship, or follow policy and lose whatever trust Marcus had placed in her. Victoria stood, walked to the front of the room. Her expression was unreadable. Marcus Sullivan is suspended effective immediately pending full investigation. He is not permitted on company premises until we've completed our review. The room erupted in whispers. Marcus stood, grabbed his bag. His eyes found Victoria's for half a second. Derek couldn't read what passed between them. Then Marcus walked out. The door closed behind him with a sound that felt final. Victoria's voice cut through the noise. This investigation will be thorough and fair. We will not rush to judgment. That's all. The meeting dissolved. Employees fled back to their desks. Derek stood slowly, watched Victoria leave through a side door, saw Thomas and Sarah Kim huddle in urgent conversation. Rachel Martinez appeared at Derek's elbow. Her voice was low. "This is wrong. Marcus wouldn't do this." Derek made sympathetic sounds. "I hope you're right. But the evidence," Rachel cut him off. "The evidence doesn't show intent. It shows Marcus opened a file for 60 seconds and closed it. That's not a leak. That's a mistake." Derek shrugged. "Above my pay grade. I'm just glad they're taking security seriously." Rachel studied him. Her expression suggested she was calculating something. Then she walked away without another word. Derek returned to his office, closed the door, sat at his desk with his hands folded. Marcus Hayes was suspended, under investigation, his career at TechCorp effectively over even if he was eventually cleared. The stain of suspicion would never fully wash away, and Derek had accomplished it using nothing but truth. Mislabeled files, unfortunate timing, the appearance of impropriety that had existed independent of anything Derek had manufactured. His phone buzzed, text from Thomas. "Good work on the analysis. We'll need you to continue monitoring as the investigation proceeds." Derek typed back, "Of course, happy to help." He meant it. This was helping himself, helping the company maintain proper boundaries, helping ensure that competence mattered more than whatever personal feelings had developed between a CEO and a project manager. That evening, Derek drove past Marcus's apartment building on Capitol Hill. 3rd floor, Unit C. Lights were on. Derek could see shadows moving behind curtains. Marcus and his daughter. A single father trying to explain to an 8-year-old why daddy suddenly couldn't go to work. Derek felt nothing. Drove home, poured wine, opened his laptop to the spreadsheet that had documented everything. He added one final entry. Marcus Hayes suspended pending investigation. Evidence suggests inappropriate file access. Career trajectory terminated. Then he closed the spreadsheet, deleted it, ran a file shredder program that made recovery impossible. The evidence existed elsewhere now. In Thomas's reports, in Sarah Kim's legal files, in Victoria Chen's knowledge that she'd been forced to choose between protecting her employee and protecting her position. Derek had simply connected dots that were already there. The rest had been inevitable. Wednesday brought confirmation of something Derek had suspected. An email from Thomas. Investigation expanded to include review of all interactions between Victoria Chen and Marcus Hayes. Need your help documenting the pattern. Derek spent the day compiling everything he'd noticed. The birthday incident, the lunch meetings, Sophia's office visit, Victoria's response times to Marcus's emails compared to everyone else's, the body language, the micro-expressions, the pattern of two people who'd crossed professional boundaries even if they'd never physically acted on it. He built the case carefully. Nothing accusatory, just facts, observations, questions that any reasonable person might ask about whether personal feelings had compromised professional judgment. By Thursday, he'd produced another 30-page report, sent it to Thomas with a cover note. "I want to be clear that I'm not suggesting anything unethical occurred, just documenting what others have observed and commented on." Thomas responded within an hour. "Understood. This helps complete the picture. Thank you. Derek deleted the email thread, cleared his sent folder, made sure no digital trail existed showing his role in compiling the evidence that would destroy 2 careers. Friday afternoon, Derek received a call from Mitchell Crane. The private investigator's voice was satisfied. Got some interesting stuff on Marcus Hayes. That employment gap? Turns out he was in therapy. Court mandated after his wife's death. Child Services wanted to make sure he was fit to care for his daughter alone. Derek wrote it down. That's perfect, Crane continued. Nothing scandalous, but it's the kind of thing that raises questions, makes people wonder what else might not be in his official record. Send me everything, full report. That'll be another $1,500 for the deep dive. Derek agreed without hesitation. Money well spent. Another piece of the puzzle that suggested Marcus Hayes wasn't quite as clean as his surface record indicated. The report arrived Saturday morning. Derek read it twice, printed a copy, put it in a folder with everything else he'd compiled. The complete portrait of a man who'd made the mistake of attracting Victoria Chen's attention and Derek Porter's envy in equal measure. By Sunday evening, Derek had everything organized: evidence, documentation, third-party verification. A case built entirely from truth, arranged carefully to suggest a narrative that might not be entirely accurate, but was definitely believable. Monday morning would bring the next phase, the expansion of the investigation. The inevitable questions about Victoria's judgment. The slow unraveling of whatever had started in that moment when she'd asked about marriage and Marcus had answered honestly. Derek stood at his window Sunday night, watched Seattle's lights blur through rain on the glass, thought about the VP position that had been denied twice, about the years of watching less qualified people advance through charm or luck or connections, about Marcus Hayes sitting in his small apartment with his daughter, probably wondering how everything had fallen apart so quickly. Derek felt the weight of what he'd done, acknowledged it, accepted it, then set it aside. Because in the mathematics of corporate survival, guilt was a luxury nobody could afford. He finished his wine, went to bed, slept soundly, because tomorrow he'd help continue the investigation, would provide additional documentation if requested, would express appropriate concern for both Marcus's situation and the company's security protocols, would do everything a loyal, dedicated, 12-year veteran of TechCorp should do when faced with a potential security breach and possible executive misconduct. And when it was over, when the dust settled and the casualties were counted, Derek Porter would still be standing, still employed, still positioned to finally claim what had been denied twice before. That was worth whatever small discomfort came from watching a colleague's career implode. Worth the knowledge that Sophia Hayes would grow up with a father whose suspension would follow him to every future job interview. Worth everything, really. Because in the end, survival mattered more than fairness, and Derek had learned that lesson early enough to use it effectively. Victoria stood in her office at 7 in the morning, watching Seattle emerge from darkness through rain-streaked windows. She hadn't slept. Hadn't gone home after the emergency meeting yesterday, just sat in this chair watching the city lights blur and sharpen with each wave of weather that swept in from the sound. Her phone showed 47 missed calls. The board, investors, department heads wanting guidance on how to handle the Marcus situation. She'd ignored them all, let them spin in uncertainty while she tried to understand how everything had collapsed so completely. The knock came at 7:15. Thomas Crawford entered without waiting for permission. He looked as exhausted as Victoria felt, his tie loosened, briefcase bulging with documents. "We need to talk about next steps." Victoria didn't turn from the window. "What next steps? Marcus is suspended. The investigation is underway. What else is there?" Thomas set his briefcase on the conference table, opened it, and extracted a folder thick enough to qualify as a weapon. This arrived from Derek Porter last night. Documentation of your interactions with Marcus Hayes over the past 6 months. Victoria finally turned. Her voice was ice. My interactions? Thomas spread papers across the table. Meeting frequencies, email response times, the birthday incident, Sophia's office visit. Every moment cataloged with timestamps and context suggesting something inappropriate. This is harassment. Victoria's hands clenched. Derek is building a case out of professional communications. Thomas's expression was careful. Professional communications don't usually involve homemade cookies and marriage proposals. It was a joke, was it? Thomas tapped one of the documents. Because 3 witnesses say you followed up with a comment about giving a real answer. That doesn't sound like a joke. Victoria moved to the table, scanned the documents. Each page was meticulously prepared, factual, damning in aggregate, even though individually none of it proved anything. What exactly is Derek accusing me of? Thomas closed the folder. Nothing directly. But he's raising questions about whether personal feelings compromised your professional judgment. Questions the board will want answered. I suspended Marcus. Victoria's voice shook slightly. I followed protocol exactly. How is that compromised judgment? You suspended him after 3 people witnessed you having an intimate conversation with his daughter, after weeks of lunch meetings and preferential treatment. Thomas picked up another document. This timeline suggests a pattern of behavior that could be interpreted as romantic interest affecting business decisions. Could be interpreted. Victoria's laugh was bitter. Everything could be interpreted. That's not evidence. Thomas gathered the documents. In employment law, perception matters as much as reality. If employees believe favoritism exists, if they can document interactions that support that belief, then we have a hostile work environment claim waiting to happen. Victoria sat down heavily. What do you want from me? Thomas's expression softened marginally. The board meets tomorrow. They'll want your explanation. They'll want to know if your relationship with Marcus Hayes influenced any business decisions. They'll want assurance that nothing inappropriate occurred. Nothing inappropriate occurred. Then you'll need to prove it. Thomas stood, because right now, Derek Porter has built a circumstantial case that suggests otherwise. And circumstantial cases are enough to end careers. After Thomas left, Victoria pulled up her email, found the thread with Marcus from the past 6 months. Read through every exchange looking for evidence of impropriety, found nothing except professional communication occasionally colored by mutual respect and understanding. But that understanding was the problem. The way they'd connected over lunch meetings discussing more than just project timelines. The moment in the elevator when honesty had felt more important than hierarchy. The birthday incident that had started as a joke and ended as something neither of them could take back. Her phone rang. Tom Bradford, the board chairman. Victoria let it ring through to voicemail, listened to his message demanding her presence at an emergency board meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning at 8. She deleted the voicemail, pulled up Morrison and Associates on her computer, the independent auditing firm she'd hired 3 weeks ago to review TechCorp's financials, specifically the operating expenses that had been bothering her since taking over as CEO. Her assistant had scheduled the final report delivery for next week. Victoria picked up her phone, called David Morrison directly. His assistant answered. Morrison and Associates. How may I direct your call? David Morrison. This is Victoria Chen from TechCorp. It's urgent. 2 minutes later, Morrison's gravelly voice came on the line. Ms. Chen, I wasn't expecting to hear from you until Monday. I need your report now. Whatever you have, even if it's incomplete. Morrison was quiet for a moment. May I ask why the urgency? Because I'm about to be fired for a relationship I didn't consummate with an employee who's been suspended for a leak he didn't commit, and I need ammunition before the board meeting tomorrow. Morrison exhaled slowly. We're 90% done. We were planning to spend this week triple-checking, but the core findings are solid. Give me 2 hours to compile what we have. Victoria hung up, opened a new document on her computer, started drafting her defense for tomorrow's board meeting. Professional, detailed, emotionless. Every interaction with Marcus explained with business justification. The birthday walk as employee engagement, the lunch meetings as mentorship, Sophia's visit as compassionate leadership. It sounded hollow even to her own ears. At 9:30 her phone buzzed, text from Marcus. First communication since his suspension. Can we talk? Not about the investigation, about Sophia. Victoria stared at the message. Every instinct screamed that communicating with Marcus now was professional suicide, that any contact would be used as evidence of improper relationship, that the smart move was silence until the investigation concluded. She typed back, "Where?" His response came immediately. Discovery Park, South Beach Trail, 10:30. Victoria grabbed her jacket, told her assistant she'd be out for 2 hours, took the elevator down to the parking garage where her car sat in its reserved spot like a luxury prison. The drive to Discovery Park took 20 minutes through morning traffic. Rain had lightened to mist, turning Seattle into a watercolor version of itself. Victoria parked in the lot where families with dogs were starting their day, oblivious to corporate investigations and career-ending decisions. Marcus stood near the trailhead. He wore jeans and a jacket, civilian clothes that made him look younger than his 35 years. His hands were shoved in his pockets. His expression was carefully neutral. They walked in silence for 5 minutes. The trail wound through dense forest that muffled the city sounds. Puddles reflected gray sky. Somewhere overhead, crows were having a conversation about territory. Finally, Marcus spoke. "Sophia asked me this morning why she can't come to my office anymore. I told her Daddy's taking a break from work. She asked if it was because of her, because she was bad that day." Victoria's throat tightened. "She wasn't bad. I know that. You know that. But she's 8 years old. Her mother died before she could form memories, and now her father is home during work hours, which in her experience means something went wrong. What do you want me to do?" Marcus stopped walking, turned to face her. His eyes held exhaustion and something else. Resignation, maybe. "I want you to know that whatever happens with the investigation, whatever they decide about me, I don't blame you. You did what you had to do. I suspended you. To buy time." Marcus's voice was quiet. "To prevent them from firing me outright. I understand that. I'm not sure the board will, but I do. They think we're involved." Victoria's words came out harder than intended. "Romantically. They have documentation of every time we've been in the same room together. Every email. Every lunch meeting. Derek Porter has built a case that suggests I showed you preferential treatment." "Did you?" The question hung between them. Honest. Direct. Impossible to answer without confirming everything the board suspected. "I don't know." Victoria looked away toward the water visible through the trees. "I wanted to believe I was being a good manager, mentoring a talented employee. But after that day and your birthday, after what you said, I can't claim every decision was purely professional." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then we're both guilty of poor judgment. Is that what this is?" Victoria's frustration bubbled up. Poor judgment. Because it feels like more than that. It feels like I finally met someone who understood what it costs to be excellent while everyone watches for you to fail. Someone who didn't need me to be anything except honest. Marcus started walking again. Victoria followed. Their footsteps made soft sounds on the wet trail. After a while, Marcus spoke again. "Jennifer used to tell me that the hardest part of being a parent wasn't the logistics. It was modeling how to be human, how to make mistakes and recover, how to want things you shouldn't and still make good choices." Victoria walked beside him. "What would she tell you now? That I need to make a choice?" Marcus's voice was steady. "Stay suspended while the investigation drags on, waiting for them to find evidence that doesn't exist. Watch my savings drain. Watch Sophia learn that her father is powerless when powerful people decide he's inconvenient. Or I resign. Take the job offer in Portland that came through last week. Start over where nobody knows about birthday jokes or confidential files or the time I thought maybe I could have something more than just survival." Victoria stopped walking. "You have a job offer?" TechSphere Inc., Senior Director. 30% salary increase. They reached out 3 months ago. I turned them down because Sophia's school, her friends, stability. And now? Now stability is a fiction. Marcus turned to face her. They're not going to clear me, Victoria. Even if the investigation finds no evidence I leaked that file, the suspicion will follow me. Every project will be scrutinized, every decision questioned. I'll be the project manager who maybe sold company secrets and definitely had something inappropriate with the CEO. That's not fair. Marcus's laugh was harsh. Fair doesn't enter into it. Derek Porter wanted me gone. He found a way. Now I have to decide if I'm going to fight a battle I can't win or take the exit that lets me provide for my daughter. What about us? The question escaped before Victoria could stop it. Naked, vulnerable, everything a CEO shouldn't expose to a subordinate during an active investigation. Marcus's expression softened. There is no us. There was the possibility of us. But that died Monday morning when I walked out of that conference room. They stood facing each other while the Seattle forest dripped around them. Victoria felt the weight of everything they'd built over 6 months crumbling under the pressure of corporate policy and Derek Porter's ambition. I'm going to fight this. Victoria's voice was fierce. The investigation, the implications, Derek's documentation. All of it. Why? Because you deserve better. Because Sophia deserves better. Victoria took a step closer. Because maybe there is no us yet, but there could have been. And I'm not going to let Derek Porter or the board or anyone else decide that possibility should be destroyed before we even got to explore it. Marcus studied her face. What's your plan? Right now? Victoria checked her watch. Wait for an audit report that might give me leverage. Attend a board meeting tomorrow where they'll try to force my resignation. Hope that somewhere in all of Derek's documentation he made a mistake. And if he didn't, then we both start over. Victoria's voice was steady now. You in Portland, me somewhere that doesn't require me to choose between competent employees and corporate politics. Marcus reached out, stopped just short of touching her hand. Sophia asked me something else this morning. She asked if Miss Victoria was going to be okay. Because she likes you. Because you were kind to her. Victoria felt tears threatening. Pushed them back. Tell her I'm going to try to be okay. And that I like her too. They walked back to the parking lot in silence. At Victoria's car, Marcus stopped. Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you for seeing me. Not the employee, not the single dad. Me. Victoria unlocked her car. Get the job offer in writing. Have a backup plan. Because if I can't fix this, you'll need to move quickly. She drove back to TechCorp with rain starting again, turning the windshield into a kaleidoscope of fragmented light. Her phone showed 23 new messages. She ignored them all. At 11:45, David Morrison called. His voice was grim. Ms. Chen, we need to meet. What we found. It's not what you expected. Victoria pulled into the TechCorp parking garage. How soon can you be here? I'm in the lobby. Morrison brought 3 associates and enough documents to wallpaper Victoria's office. They spread them across the conference table while rain hammered against the windows. We started with the operating expenses you flagged. Morrison opened a laptop. Found irregularities in vendor payments. A company called Meridian Solutions. $47,000 over 3 months for vague consulting services. Victoria leaned forward. I saw those payments. Assumed they were legitimate. They're not. Morrison pulled up bank records. Meridian Solutions is a shell company. The address is a UPS store. The bank account traces to an LLC registered in Delaware. And the LLC is owned by a trust controlled by Derek Porter. The room went silent except for rain and the building's HVAC system. Derek has been embezzling? Victoria's voice was carefully controlled. Not just embezzling. Morrison's associate, a woman named Jennifer Park, pulled up more documents. We dug deeper, found a pattern going back 18 months. Fake vendors, inflated invoices, money moving through shell companies and eventually into accounts Derek controls. Total we can document, $340,000. Victoria sat down slowly. 340,000. Morrison nodded. But that's not all. We also reviewed the network security logs. The confidential merger file that Marcus Hayes allegedly leaked. Derek accessed it 11 minutes before it was sent externally, from his personal laptop using a VPN that masked the IP address. Victoria's pulse quickened. Can you prove that? Jennifer Park handed over a technical report. The VPN wasn't as clean as Derek thought, left digital fingerprints in the routing tables. We can trace the connection back to his apartment in Ballard. Date, time, everything. So Derek framed Marcus. Victoria was already reaching for her phone. Set him up to take the fall for a leak. Derek committed himself. Morrison closed his laptop. There's more. Derek hired a private investigator to dig into Marcus's background. We found payment records, email correspondence. Derek was building a comprehensive file on Marcus while simultaneously engineering his termination. Why? Jennifer Park asked. What did Marcus do to warrant this level of attention? Victoria knew the answer. Existed. Was competent. Attracted the CEO's notice when Derek had spent 12 years being invisible. She pulled up Thomas Crawford's number. We need an emergency meeting. HR, legal, and the board chairman. 1 hour. Thomas resisted. Victoria, the board meeting is tomorrow. We can handle this through normal channels. We have evidence that Derek Porter embezzled $340,000 and framed Marcus Hayes for a security breach. Derek committed himself. Victoria's voice was steel. Normal channels ended the moment this became fraud and conspiracy. 1 hour. My office, non-negotiable. The call ended. Victoria turned to Morrison. I need copies of everything, digital and physical, documented in a way that will survive legal scrutiny. We've been preparing for exactly that. Morrison gestured to his associates. You'll have comprehensive reports within 30 minutes. Victoria stood, paced to the window, watched Seattle do its usual dance of rain and determination. At 1:15, Thomas Crawford arrived with Sarah Kim. Both looked like they'd been dragged from important meetings, which they had. Tom Bradford appeared 10 minutes later, the board chairman's face already arranged into disapproval. This better be important. Bradford settled into a chair with the weight of someone accustomed to being deferred to. You have the board meeting tomorrow to present your defense regarding Marcus Hayes. This is about Marcus Hayes. Victoria gestured to Morrison, but not the defense you're expecting. Morrison took over, walked them through the audit findings. Meridian Solutions. The embezzlement. The network security logs proving Derek had accessed and leaked the merger file. The private investigator. The systematic frame-up of an innocent employee. By the end, Thomas Crawford had gone pale. Sarah Kim was typing furiously on her laptop. Tom Bradford sat frozen, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and calculation. Finally, Bradford spoke. You're telling me Derek Porter stole $340,000, framed Marcus Hayes, and nearly destroyed this company's credibility because of what? Professional jealousy? Not just jealousy. Victoria pulled up Derek's employment file on the conference room screen. Derek was passed over for promotion twice. Both times, the positions went to candidates with diverse backgrounds. Derek saw Marcus as another example of affirmative action taking what he felt he deserved. Sarah Kim looked up from her laptop. If this is accurate, we need to contact law enforcement immediately. This isn't just termination. This is criminal fraud. And defamation, Thomas added. Derek's documentation about Victoria and Marcus, if it was compiled with intent to damage their careers, opens us to lawsuits from both of them. Bradford pulled out his phone. I'm calling the board. We need an emergency session tonight. Victoria held up a hand. Before you do that, we need to address Marcus Hayes' suspension. He needs to be reinstated immediately with full back pay. Bradford hesitated. The optics of that. The optics of keeping an innocent employee suspended while we prosecute the person who framed him are worse. Victoria's voice left no room for negotiation. Marcus is reinstated. Today, with a formal apology from Tech Corp, and whatever additional compensation Sarah determines is appropriate for the damage to his reputation. Sarah nodded. I'll draft the reinstatement letter and recommend a settlement that includes significant compensation, plus a non-disparagement clause that protects both parties. What about Derek? Thomas looked physically ill. He's still in the building, still accessing our systems. Sarah was already moving toward the door. I'll have security remove him immediately, escort him from the premises, confiscate all devices. Nobody talks to him without legal counsel present. The room emptied quickly. Morrison and his team to finalize reports, Sarah to coordinate with security, Thomas to prepare documentation, Bradford to call board members. Victoria sat alone in her office, pulled up her email, typed a message to Marcus. New evidence has emerged. You're being reinstated effective immediately. Full back pay plus compensation for damages. Formal apology coming. Can you come to the office at 3 p.m.? She hit send, watched the message disappear into the network, wondered if Marcus would believe it, or if trust, once broken, stayed broken, regardless of vindication. Her phone buzzed. Marcus's response. What kind of evidence? Victoria typed, the kind that proves Derek Porter is a criminal and you were set up. Please come in. We need to fix this. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I'll be there. At 2:45, security escorted Derek Porter from the building. Victoria watched from her window as he emerged into the parking garage with 2 security officers flanking him. His briefcase and laptop had been confiscated. His face was carefully blank, but his body language screamed rage. Sarah Kim stood beside Victoria. Federal prosecutors are already interested. The fraud amount triggers federal jurisdiction. Derek could be looking at significant prison time. Good. Victoria's voice was flat. He tried to destroy an innocent man's career because of professional jealousy. He deserves whatever consequences follow. What about Marcus? Victoria checked her watch. He'll be here in 10 minutes. We're presenting him with reinstatement papers, formal apology, and a compensation package that Sarah's team finalized an hour ago. And after that? After that? Victoria turned from the window. We see if the possibility we talked about still exists, or if Derek Porter managed to kill it even though he failed at everything else. Marcus arrived at 3 o'clock exactly. Victoria met him in the lobby, led him to her office where Thomas and Sarah waited with documents spread across the conference table. Marcus's expression was guarded as he sat, looked at the papers, at Victoria, at Thomas and Sarah. Finally, what is this? Sarah spoke first. Marcus, we owe you an apology. Evidence has emerged proving you were framed by Derek Porter. You did not leak the confidential file. Derek did. He embezzled $340,000 from Tech Corp and set you up to cover his tracks. Marcus processed this in silence. Then, Derek framed me. Yes. Thomas pushed forward a document. This is your reinstatement letter, effective immediately, full back pay from the moment of suspension, all documentation of the investigation removed from your file. Sarah added another folder. This is a compensation package, significant financial damages for the harm to your reputation, plus professional development opportunities, leadership training, whatever you need to rebuild. Marcus picked up the papers, read them carefully, set them down. His voice was steady. Derek embezzled money, framed me. And you caught him how? Victoria answered. I authorized an independent audit 3 weeks ago. Unrelated to you. I was concerned about operating expenses. The auditors found irregularities. When they dug deeper, they found Derek's fraud. And when they reviewed network security logs, they found evidence he leaked the merger file himself. So, I was collateral damage. Marcus's tone was neutral. Derek was stealing money, needed a distraction, saw me as convenient, more than convenient. Thomas pulled up Derek's email correspondence with the private investigator. He'd been building a case against you for months, documenting your interactions with Victoria, hiring investigators to find dirt on your background. This was premeditated and systematic. Marcus stood, walked to the window, looked out at Seattle doing its usual routine of beauty and indifference. Finally, he turned back. What happens to Derek? Federal prosecution. Sarah's voice was firm. The fraud amount triggers federal jurisdiction. He'll likely face charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, and computer crimes. Prison time is almost certain. And my suspension is erased. My record is clean. Completely, Thomas confirmed. As far as TechCorp's systems are concerned, you were never suspended. The investigation never happened. You took a brief personal leave that ended today. Marcus absorbed this, then looked at Victoria. And us? Victoria had known this question was coming, had prepared for it during the 2 hours between Marcus's arrival and the moment the investigation revealed the truth. But preparation didn't make the answer easier. That depends on what you want. Victoria's voice was careful. The evidence clears you professionally, proves Derek manufactured the case about inappropriate relationships, but it doesn't change the fact that something exists between us, something that complicated everything before Derek got involved. Sophia asked me this morning why she can't come to my office anymore. I told her Daddy's taking a break from work. Marcus returned to the table, sat down, looked at the reinstatement papers. What if I don't want to stay at TechCorp? Karen's been worried too. Keeps asking if we're okay financially. I told her we'd manage. You don't have to. Sarah pushed forward another document. This settlement includes the option to resign with full benefits and significant severance, or you can stay, transfer to a different department, work with a different executive sponsor, whatever makes you comfortable. What would make me comfortable? Marcus's laugh was bitter. That ended the moment Victoria asked if I'd marry her in front of 200 colleagues. Everything since then has been damage control. Thomas and Sarah exchanged glances. Thomas cleared his throat. We'll give you two some privacy. Marcus, take your time reviewing the documents. We'll need your decision by end of business tomorrow. They left. The office door closed with a soft click. Victoria sat across from Marcus. Rain had started again, turning the windows into abstract watercolors. The city spread below them looked both close and impossibly distant. I'm sorry. Victoria's words felt inadequate, for all of it. The joke, the suspension, the investigation, everything. You were doing your job. Marcus studied the papers without really reading them. Following protocol. Making the hard choice. That doesn't mean it didn't hurt you. Marcus looked up. His eyes held something Victoria couldn't quite read. You know what hurts? Not the suspension. Not Derek's frame-up. Those are just corporate politics. What hurts is that for 6 months, I believed I might get to be more than just a competent employee who leaves at 5. That maybe someone saw me as a whole person. And then when it mattered, when Derek forced your hand, I learned that professional protocol wins every time. Victoria felt the accusation land. You're right. I chose protocol, but I chose it to buy time, to find the truth before they fired you outright. Did you? Marcus's voice was quiet. Or did you choose it because maintaining your position was more important than defending someone you claimed to care about? The question hung between them. Honest. Brutal. Impossible to answer without confronting everything Victoria had avoided thinking about during the investigation. I don't know. Victoria's admission felt like surrender. I told myself I was being strategic, that suspension was better than termination, that I needed time to prove your innocence. But maybe I was just protecting myself, my career, my position. Marcus stood, gathered the documents. I need to think about this. About whether I want to stay at a company where my competence matters less than someone else's jealousy, where a CEO makes jokes she can't take back and then suspends me to cover herself. That's not fair. Marcus's expression was sad. No, it's not. But not everything that's true is fair. He walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the handle. Sophia asked about you again this morning. Wanted to know if Miss Victoria was okay. I told her you were fine. That grown-ups sometimes have complicated situations, but they work out. Do they? Victoria's voice was small. Work out? Sometimes. Marcus opened the door. Sometimes people decide the possibility of something good is worth the risk of more pain. And sometimes they decide survival matters more than possibility. Which one are you? Marcus looked back. His eyes were Jennifer's eyes, dark and perceptive. I don't know yet. Ask me tomorrow. He left. Victoria sat alone in her office while the rain intensified and the city disappeared behind sheets of water. Her phone buzzed. Tom Bradford. Board meeting is set for tomorrow 8 a.m. We'll be announcing Derek's termination and criminal charges. Be prepared to explain how this happened under your leadership. Victoria typed back acknowledgement, closed her phone, looked at the empty chair where Marcus had been sitting. She'd won. Proven Marcus's innocence. Exposed Derek's fraud. Protected Tech Corp from legal liability. Done everything a competent CEO should do when faced with internal corruption. But winning felt hollow when the cost was trust that might never be rebuilt. Her assistant knocked. Ms. Chen? The compensation committee needs final approval on Marcus Hayes' settlement package. Send it through. Victoria didn't look up. Whatever Sarah recommended is fine. The assistant hesitated. There's also a question about his role going forward. HR wants to know if he's staying in project management or transferring. I don't know. Victoria finally looked up. He's thinking about it. Should I put him down as undecided? Put him down as having choices. Victoria returned to her computer, which is more than Derek Porter left him with. The evening passed in bureaucratic necessity. Emails, conference calls, legal reviews. The machinery of corporate crisis management grinding forward with its usual combination of efficiency and heartlessness. At 7, Victoria's phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. Sophia wants to know if you're coming to her piano recital Saturday. She's been practicing extra hard. Victoria stared at the message. The recital she'd heard about weeks ago. The one Sophia had mentioned that day in Conference Room C when Victoria had knelt beside an 8-year-old and offered candy and kindness. She typed back, I'll be there. What time? 2 p.m. Franklin Elementary School, auditorium. Sophia's playing third. Victoria saved the details, typed, thank you for inviting me. 3 dots appeared. Then, I didn't. Sophia did. I'm just the messenger. Victoria smiled, despite everything. Tell her I wouldn't miss it. The response came quickly. She'll be happy. She needs happy right now. Victoria set down her phone, looked out at Seattle transformed into light and shadow by rain and darkness. Somewhere in this city, an 8-year-old girl was practicing piano, preparing for a recital where her father would watch with pride and her potential future stepmother would sit in the audience, wondering if possibility could survive corporate politics. The board meeting tomorrow would determine Victoria's future at Tech Corp. Marcus's decision would determine whether that future included the person who'd made 6 months bearable. And Sophia's recital would reveal whether any of it mattered compared to a child's need for stability and adults who kept their promises. Victoria pulled up her computer, started drafting her statement for tomorrow's board meeting. Professional, detailed, taking responsibility for the failures that had allowed Derek's fraud to continue undetected while defending the decisions that had ultimately exposed it. Halfway through, she stopped. Deleted everything. Started over. She wrote until midnight, crafting a statement that was true rather than safe, that acknowledged failure alongside the fix. At 12:30, she sent the draft to no one. Just saved it, shut down her computer, locked her office, drove home through empty streets where rain had finally stopped and Seattle was catching its breath between storms. Tomorrow would bring consequences. The board meeting, Marcus's decision, the beginning of whatever came next. But tonight, Victoria had done what she could, exposed the truth, offered restoration, extended an invitation to a piano recital that mattered more than any quarterly earnings call. She slept badly, woke at 5, dressed carefully in a navy suit that projected confidence she didn't feel, arrived at TechCorp at 6:30 to prepare. The board meeting started at 8 sharp, all 9 members present, Tom Bradford at the head of the table, Victoria standing because sitting felt like surrender. She presented the findings: Derek's fraud, the frame-up, Marcus's vindication, the settlement offer, every fact documented and verified. Bradford let her finish. Then, how did this happen? How did Derek Porter steal $340,000 without detection? Victoria had prepared for this, because our financial controls prioritized efficiency over verification, because Derek had been here 12 years and earned trust through competent mediocrity, because nobody wanted to believe that someone could be both reliable and corrupt. And Marcus Hayes? Another board member, Margaret Stevens, leaned forward. How do we know he won't sue for wrongful termination because our settlement package is generous enough to make litigation unnecessary and burdensome enough that pursuing it would cost him more than he'd gain? Victoria kept her voice level. And because Marcus is fundamentally decent, which is why Derek chose him as a target. The questions continued for 90 minutes. Victoria answered each one with facts and documentation and the careful neutrality of someone who knew her career hung on every word. Finally, Bradford called for a vote. All in favor of accepting the investigation findings and settlement recommendations? 9 hands rose. All in favor of criminal prosecution? 9 hands again. Bradford turned to Victoria. You've handled this appropriately. The board recognizes that Derek's fraud predated your tenure and that you took decisive action once evidence emerged. Victoria nodded, waited for the other shoe. However, Bradford's pause was calculated. We're concerned about the optics of your relationship with Marcus Hayes. Whether it existed or not, the perception creates liability. Victoria had prepared for this too. I'm prepared to transfer Marcus to a different department with a different executive sponsor. All future interactions will be documented and transparent. That may not be sufficient. Margaret Stevens spoke carefully. The board feels it would be best if you avoided all personal contact with Mr. Hayes going forward. Professional interactions only. Properly documented. Victoria felt something break inside her chest. You're telling me I can't attend his daughter's piano recital. We're telling you that maintaining appropriate boundaries is essential. Bradford's tone was final, both for your protection and his. Victoria looked around the table. 9 faces arranged in professional concern. 9 people who'd never had to choose between human connection and corporate policy. She took a breath. With respect, I disagree. I will maintain professional boundaries in all work contexts. But Sophia Hayes invited me to her recital, and I'm going to honor that invitation, because a child's trust matters more than corporate optics. The room went silent. Bradford's expression hardened. Ms. Chen, we're giving you guidance, and I'm exercising my judgment. Victoria's voice was steady. Fire me if you need to. But I'm not going to teach an 8-year-old girl that adults break promises because of company policy. Bradford stood. We'll take a recess. 30 minutes. The board filed out. Victoria sat alone in the conference room, checked her phone. No messages from Marcus about his decision. 20 minutes later, her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. This is Rachel Martinez. Marcus gave me your number. Wanted you to know he's submitting his reinstatement paperwork this morning. He's staying. Victoria felt relief flood through her. Typed back. Thank you for telling me. Rachel responded. He also said to tell you that Sophia's been practicing her recital piece every night. She's nervous about performing in front of Miss Victoria. Victoria smiled, despite the tears threatening. Tell him I'll be there, front row. The board returned. Bradford looked grim but resigned. We've discussed your position. You'll continue as CEO with the understanding that any future boundary issues will result in immediate termination. Understood. Victoria stood. Is there anything else? Bradford's expression softened marginally. Don't make us regret giving you latitude. I won't. Victoria left the boardroom. took the elevator down to the third floor, found Marcus at his desk, back to work like the past week hadn't happened. She stopped at a professional distance. "Welcome back." Marcus looked up. His expression was guarded but not hostile. "Thank you. For fighting. For finding the truth. I'm sorry it took so long." Marcus gestured to the papers on his desk. "Reinstatement forms. I'm staying. Transferring to operations. New supervisor. Fresh start. That's good." Victoria struggled for words. "Sophia's recital. I'm still planning to attend, if that's okay." Marcus's expression finally cracked, showed something like relief. "She'd be disappointed if you didn't. She's been telling everyone at school that her friend Miss Victoria is coming to watch her play. I'll be there. Front row." Victoria meant it. "Whatever else happens, I keep promises to 8-year-olds." Marcus nodded. "Then we'll see you Saturday." Victoria returned to her office, sat at her desk, looked out at Seattle where rain was starting again, and the city was doing its usual dance of persistence and reinvention. Her phone showed a calendar reminder. Sophia's recital, Saturday 2 p.m., Franklin Elementary. Victoria added a note. "Bring flowers. Blue are her favorite." Then she opened her laptop and got back to work, because that's what you did when survival and possibility were fighting for space in the same life. You showed up, kept promises, hoped that somewhere between professional boundaries and human connection, there was room for both.